Welcome to Enterprise Technology Spotlight. My name is Keith Hales with InfoSystems, where we believe that business leaders shouldn't just push off IT decisions to someone else. They should get educated, get informed, so they can make the best decisions for their business. And joining me today is a longtime industry veteran who's not that old, but an industry veteran, Chris Gobert with IBM. Chris, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Keith. Good to be here.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to have you back on the IBM team and be working with you. So I do think it would make sense just for the folks listening who don't know you, tell us just kind of a 1-minute background of you and kind of why you decided to come back to IBM.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in the industry, as you mentioned, for a while. I actually started at 17 in Atlanta. And my father, I'm a second generation IBMer. Mm-hmm. And so I had interest very early on. And I joined the industry during a dramatic change in the industry when computing was really turning the corner in the early 90s.
Mm. Yeah, so that's exciting. So to have that kind of an experience of getting in at the right time. So I know you hit a couple of different spots, a family-owned business at one point, right? But then more recently, you came back to IBM after you had left, and IBM was a different place now than it was when you left a few years ago, right?
I mean, I think it's a great point, right? And I have been a business partner, which allows me as a channel manager to really identify with people like yourself because I've been there, right? I've done it. That said, IBM really turned another corner a couple of years ago with the acquisition of Texas Memory Systems. Mm-hmm. I was part of that company. Now that flash technology is proliferated in the industry, the change that comes for that has just become dramatic. Mm. I know you have different segments where you talk about the products, but it's just another flashpoint, another time of massive change in the industry.
Yeah, no, it really is. That flash technology has really revolutionized computing because it gets the data available to the computers, right? Every system has a bottleneck, right? No matter what. And computers are no different. And so that flash technology serves up the data, all that information. And let's get real. We're creating data, by the droves today. Every recording, every video, every picture. Google's always listening to what we're saying. I mean, everything is happening, and so that data, as opposed to being filed away somewhere it can't reach it, that flash technology brings it up to the stage. But I think that brings up a really big point, which is where do we put our data? Right. And then how do we make that data available? And I know that IBM saw this thing coming. They saw this data everywhere. How we're going to manage it, how we're going to make this efficient for our users.
Right.
So that's why they made the decision to buy Red Hat and kind of go down this multi-cloud path. So tell me a little bit about why Red Hat was an important acquisition for IBM.
Sure.
And then later we'll talk about how it enables kind of that multi-cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. So on July 9th of 2019, IBM acquired Red Hat. And that was a significant move by the company. It was significant in the industry. OpenStack is a big part of that. And there's a lot of confusion about cloud. There's a big rush towards cloud. In some ways, that's good. In other ways, you as an IT professional want to step back and say, is it the right thing to do in every case? And as you know, it's not the right thing to do in every case. And what it really does for the C-level client is it goes back to traditional IT planning, right? What is acceptable to have out there? What's acceptable in public cloud? What do you want to have in-house? What do you want to hold back? What are the security issues? And you get into DevOps and all the things that, can start to change the way you look at the industry. So with the acquisition of Red Hat in July and the move towards OpenStack, IBM's really put a signal out to the industry that they're in this container business. Kubernetes is part of the future, and OpenStack's going to be a big part of that.
Yeah. So we've talked about the cloud on the podcast before, but basically the cloud is just your server, your system's running somewhere else, right?
That's fair.
And what Red Hat has done is they have tools so that you don't have to run a full server everywhere. You can run just specific services, whether that is on a cloud system like AWS or Azure, or on your own system as well.
You got it.
And so it's that toolkit. And in fact, most of the time, most people don't know this, but I don't think I'm under NDA. AWS and Azure actually don't run full servers all the time. When you buy a server from them, you're actually just buying a container from them.
It's a great point. And with VMware, the introduction of VMware and virtualization in the 90s, that changed the economics. Mm-hmm. Cloud is now changing the economics, but there's frankly a lot of confusion out there about what cloud is. And they talk about hybrid cloud. Well, hybrid cloud is just a move away from internal. Traditionally, people like me in the 90s came in to sell infrastructure to the C-level. Well, that infrastructure is now moved out to somebody else's infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And again, how you do that, traditionally, and I've been in high availability most of my career, about 80% of it's in the planning. Unfortunately, what's happened with cloud is there was such a rush to cloud because of the economics. Some of the planning got missed. So there's a lot of confusion in the industry. IBM's move towards multi-cloud has been a big part of that because of the acceleration of people moving their workloads offsite. Mm-hmm. And what are the ramifications of that? So now you have things in the industry, and I'll try to give you some real world examples here. I worked with a large airline that does their reservation system on the mainframe. Well, the mainframe now has the opportunity to present images to a cloud-based system. So the airline can then use an app and have all the other little tools that they want to use without having to tax the CPU of the traditional infrastructure. So it's sort of best of both worlds, right? You get the great compute power of the mainframe environment, but you're able to serve that up in a way that data and information can be used by consumers in a way that it's never been used in the past.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the beauty of the cloud, right? So you may have these great systems that your company has been leveraging for years, maybe decades, right? In some of these cases, and all that computing power, it's rock solid. Everybody feels really good about it. But then, that data is needed by customers. It's needed on the smartphone. It's needed anywhere, anytime, any place. And so large enterprises may not want to buy all that compute for 24/7, and they may not want that hassle. And quite frankly, they may not want to pay for even the internet bandwidth to service all those customers. So that's a great application of putting something on that cloud, but they don't want to move their entire technology stack out to Amazon or to Azure or somebody like that. So they've developed a multi-cloud strategy, whether it's an internal private cloud or partnered with a public cloud to create that experience for their end users. So
you got it. And to be clear, hybrid is that mix of traditional infrastructure and then having your data somewhere else. But multi-cloud is the next evolution of that. And that allows, you mentioned earlier, bring your own device, right? People are using their phones for everything now. And that's changed the way that not only we've gone to market, but how IT's done. So as you add applications, as you add new ways for your consumers and clients who are demanding products quicker to do things, you have to do it outside the traditional infrastructure. And the multi-cloud is really a great way to deploy that without really giving away your secret sauce, without putting your database in a public cloud or taking risks with your data that's driving the business and running the business.
That's really, that's a great point. So let's talk about how Red Hat kind of enables that, right? So sure. We've talked about all like the need to plan and the fact that we can leverage multiple sets of infrastructure to accomplish the business goal. But how does that actually work? Because that sounds like a really complex thing to code all that stuff manually and to figure out how I'm going to have different systems and applications live in different places. I mean, how does Red Hat get us there?
Well, DevOps is a big part of any infrastructure. And traditionally, companies have used application development internally to build applications that sat in their own infrastructure. Well, those days have since passed. And now as they write applications, they want to do it in a way that does not require them to lock into one vendor. And vendor lock is driving a significant amount of this because if you think about it, you want to create a new application, you want your clients to access data, traditional data, maybe stored data that you've never been able to benefit from in the past to access it in a different way. Well, Red Hat and OpenStack give you the ability to do that without vendor lock-in. And that's a key part of the acquisition was to say, hey, you don't have to buy somebody's proprietary cloud architecture and build again in a wall, right? You can build a more open structure. And that's critical to end users these days.
So let's talk about an example of that. So let's say I'm a company and I do write some of my own software. Maybe I run a lot of unique software. And so I might need aspects of it to live on the cloud at some points in time, right? Maybe during development or maybe whenever I'm doing like a proof of concept or I need some external user to have access to it. But then there may be other times where I need to run it internally because of security reasons, or I need to archive it, right? And once it becomes steady state and I know it's not going to grow any faster, it's not going to get a lot smaller, it's kind of become a more of a known quantity. Then I can move it to internal infrastructure, which may be cheaper than running it in the cloud. So that OpenShift and that which was part of the Red Hat acquisition allows for those applications to live wherever it makes sense for them to live at that moment in time.
Right. And in the past, you built an application for a specific environment. Well, today you're building applications to be portable. You hear containers a lot. That's how they're deployed. So with OpenStack, you get to develop an application that can live anywhere, that can reside anywhere, really transparent to the end users. And that allows you to do a lot of really great things, including protect your number one asset, your data. Mm-hmm. Let's face it, your database, your client information. People like me would argue that you want to keep that in-house, right? But that doesn't mean you can't take an immutable snap of that data and present it for one of your other systems to use. And really, you can slice and dice that any way you want. There may be things like weather data that come from public clouds, right? And you may want to ingest some of that for, say, a client of yours that's doing something outdoors. The mm-hmm. weather's important, or they're traveling or flying. So there's just so many use cases in 2020 that we didn't have 20 years ago that really opened the aperture up to allow you to do things differently. It doesn't have to be all in-house or all public cloud, or it can be a mix of all of those things. And that's what MultiCloud allows you to do.
Yeah. So I guess kind of one final question before we wrap up here is what size company? Because we've talked about companies
Sure.
that typically have dev shops, right? Usually they have some type of internal application development, or maybe a diverse application software need. Most of the time, we don't see the 20, 30 person company acquiring Red Hat in order to make this happen. But is this kind of only for the enterprise, or where does this fit as far as in the market, as far as segments and size of company and business need?
It's a great point. It's a great question. And really what happens in 2020 that didn't happen 20 years ago is you may have no idea how your application's really being deployed. Is it sitting in a Red Hat environment? Is it sitting in an OpenStack environment? Is it sitting on a Google Cloud behind the Google Kubernetes mm-hmm. Engine? Today, you as an end user, you may not know that. So you may be a 30 or 40 person shop running an OpenStack, but you're buying your product through a third party and really don't know how it's deployed. So it's a long way around saying that sometimes these things are happening behind the scenes and the end user really doesn't know what's driving it or care. As long as it's highly available, they can get to it quickly, and it achieves what they're trying to get done.
Absolutely. Yeah. And technology is a tool, right? And so Exactly. It sounds like this container tool set that OpenShift brings to us is really kind of that tool that we've been waiting for, that gives us, that finally delivers on the promise of the cloud.
Yeah. And to that point, again, a lot of small and medium customers may never see what's behind the curtain, so to speak. But these large shops see it. I've worked with some large retailers who really have gotten into cloud native and cloud native design. And using OpenShift, using a Red Hat product allows them to do it at a much lower price point so they can have economies of scale. That's not possible with a lot of the cloud providers today because you're locking yourself into a certain platform. Mm-hmm. So it's important for a lot of my clients to develop and to bring things like security into DevOps, but to do it in a responsible way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know you and I could talk forever because sometimes we do that. But for the purpose of this podcast, I think we need to go ahead and wrap things up. So thank you for joining us for Enterprise Technology Spotlight. I hope that this has been an interesting conversation and that you've learned a little bit more about how Red Hat and OpenShift bring the promise of the cloud finally to the end customers, whether they be large businesses or even the small business consumer as well. So thank you for joining us, and look forward to you joining us next time.